The hidden pain of INFJs and INTJs. What Carl Jung never told you. Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Carl Jung's words echo deeply in the hearts of INFJs and INTJs souls, who see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. In this video, we'll uncover the hidden pain behind their quiet strength, the emotional depth they rarely reveal, and the secret struggles that come with carrying such profound insight. As you listen, ask yourself, do you recognize these traits in your own journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else understand theirs. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where together we explore the psychology of depth, purpose, and awakening. 1. Core psychological insights. Carl Jung's perspective. Carl Jung taught that every human being is influenced by two forces, the external environment and the internal, subjective world. Most people live primarily through the external, what they see, hear, and experience. But for intuitive introverts, like INFJs and INTJs, life begins within. Their existence is guided not by what the world demands, but by the subtle language of their inner images, symbols, and emotions. They are driven by the invisible, by the energy that flows beneath the surface of things. While others react to the outer world, they respond to a reality that exists in silence, deep in the soul. Jung once said that the psyche is not a blank slate. From birth, it carries within it ancient blueprints, archetypes, tendencies, and instincts that shape how we see and feel. For INFJs and INTJs, this inner inheritance is strong. They are born with a map already etched into their spirit, and their journey through life is not to create meaning, but to uncover the meaning that was always there. They move through the world like dreamers with open eyes, sensing connections and patterns that others overlook. Their imagination is not fantasy. It is an extension of truth, a bridge between consciousness and the divine field of symbols that Jung called the collective unconscious. To live with such inner clarity, however, often means to suffer. The world rarely understands those who see beneath appearances. While society celebrates speed, efficiency, and visibility, intuitive introverts crave depth, stillness, and authenticity. They are often misunderstood, labeled distant or detached, when in reality, they are simply attuned to a quieter frequency. This dissonance between inner truth and outer noise becomes their hidden pain, the loneliness of souls who feel everything yet cannot fully express it. They move through conversations that feel shallow, relationships that lack depth, and jobs that seem empty, carrying within them the burden of unseen understanding. For them, the so-called illusory world that others dismiss is more real than what meets the eye. It is made of living energy vibrations that shape emotion, intuition, and destiny. Every image that rises in their mind carries symbolic power. Every dream whispers messages from the unconscious, urging them toward growth. Jung saw this not as pathology, but as a spiritual awakening in motion, a sacred dialogue between the finite self and the infinite soul. To deny it is to repress the very essence of their being. To embrace it is to awaken to a higher state of consciousness where intuition becomes revelation. This inner world is both sanctuary and battlefield. It grants them visionary insight, but demands solitude. It gives them purpose, but often isolates them from others. They wrestle with existential questions long before most people even notice them. Questions about destiny, identity, and the meaning of life itself. In this tension lies their pain, but also their power. For when they learn to trust their inner voice, rather than fear its depth, they transform their suffering into wisdom. Spirituality, for them, is not an escape from reality. It is the process of weaving the invisible and visible into harmony. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong task of becoming who you truly are. For INFJs and INTJs, that path is a spiritual awakening disguised as psychological struggle. It is the gradual realization that their inner vision is not a curse, but a gift meant to guide both themselves and others. Their pain becomes their initiation, their solitude, their sanctuary, their depth, their divine compass. In a world ruled by distraction, they remind humanity that the soul is still the most powerful source of truth, and that what lies within us is not illusion, but the living energy that shapes all things. Are you ready to explore the hidden depths of your mind? If this message resonates with your soul, comment below, "I'm awakening," to begin your journey into true self-understanding. 2. The nature of intuitive introverts. They live with one foot in the physical world and the other in the invisible realm of meaning, constantly moving between what can be seen and what can only be felt. These intuitive introverts, INFJs and INTJs, carry within them an ancient sensitivity that perceives more than most people realize. They don't just see faces, they sense the energy behind them. They don't just hear words, they feel the tension, the intent, the vibration that lingers beneath. Their world is built on subtleties, on the unspoken, the symbolic, the unseen connections between events that others overlook. To them, reality is a web of meaning rather than a sequence of moments. But because their perception moves in silence, it is often misunderstood. Others see their quiet nature as detachment, when in truth, they are listening deeply to people's emotions, to the atmosphere of a room, to the whisper of something greater that moves through everything. With such perception comes both depth and distance. Their ability to see through illusion often isolates them from those who live comfortably on the surface. They notice too much the motives that hide behind kindness, the sorrow that hides behind laughter, and so they learn early that not everyone wants truth. They guard their inner world carefully, retreating into solitude not out of pride, but out of necessity. The more they grow in spiritual wisdom, the more they realize that solitude is not emptiness, it is sacred space. It's where they can breathe, reflect, and realign their energy away from the chaos of superficial living. Yet even in that sanctuary, there's a quiet ache, a feeling of being alone in a world that often rewards noise more than insight. Their spiritual growth demands that they bear this loneliness as a kind of initiation, a rite that sharpens their inner clarity and deepens their empathy for those who still sleep. Over time, they develop a strange peace with being misunderstood. They begin to see their detachment not as a flaw, but as protection. For when you walk between worlds, you learn that not everyone is meant to walk with you. They carry ancient questions within them, questions about purpose, destiny, and the architecture of the soul. They wonder why they see so deeply into others, why their hearts ache for what's hidden beneath appearances. But in that wandering, they also awaken to something beautiful, the realization that their perception is not a burden, but a bridge between the human and the divine. Their spirituality teaches them to find meaning even in pain, to turn isolation into insight, and to see every emotional wound as a door toward transformation. Still, the pain runs quietly through their lives. They long to be understood, but refuse to betray their depth to gain acceptance. They watch the world chase distractions and wonder why people are afraid of silence, why truth makes so many uncomfortable. In those moments, they often feel invisible, like observers in a world that values noise over awareness. But it is precisely this distance that allows them to see what others cannot: the subtle harmony behind chaos, the divine rhythm hidden inside uncertainty. Their spiritual growth depends on embracing this paradox to remain grounded in the physical world while never losing sight of the unseen one that gives it meaning. So they move through life as silent healers, absorbing energies, sensing shifts, translating the language of the soul into understanding. They carry the invisible weight of knowing, yet also the quiet joy of seeing beauty others overlook. Their inner world becomes their cathedral, their perception, their prayer. And though they often feel alone in a shallow world, they are never truly lonely because their depth connects them to the heartbeat of existence itself, where every act of awareness becomes an offering to the mystery that made them. Comment below: I embrace my inner intuition. If you're ready to honor the quiet strength within you and walk the path of true self-understanding. 3. Why they suffer. The suffering of INFJs and INTJs runs deeper than words can express. It is not a wound of the body, but of the soul, a quiet, aching loneliness that comes from being unseen in a world that rarely understands depth. They move through life with the feeling of being invisible, their inner world vast and intricate, yet hidden behind calm expressions. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." This is their silent truth. They live in a constant state of perception, sensing the emotional temperature of every room, decoding every tone, every gesture, every silence. To others, they may seem distant, but within, they are overwhelmed by constant internal analysis, where even the smallest interaction can spiral into hours of reflection and self-questioning. Their minds are not wired for the surface. They are built to see beneath it. Society calls them overthinkers, but this label misses the essence of who they are. Their way of thinking is not excess, it is precision. They are attuned to patterns that others cannot see, to emotional currents that flow beneath words, to the subtle energy that shapes every human exchange. They do not simply live in the world, they interpret it. But this heightened awareness comes with a cost. Each emotion they sense, each unspoken truth they uncover, sinks into them like a weight. They feel everything deeply, and that sensitivity often turns into exhaustion. The noise of the world becomes too loud, the emotions of others too heavy, and so they retreat not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. Their solitude is a sanctuary where they can breathe again, where they can quiet the storm within. For INFJs and INTJs, silence is not emptiness, it is medicine. It allows them to return to their own energy after being flooded by everyone else's. Yet even in solitude, there lingers a longing for a wish to be truly understood without having to explain, to meet someone who speaks the language of depth. They crave authentic connection, but the modern world often rewards the superficial. Conversations about meaning, soul, or purpose are seen as strange, and so they learn to hide their light, to dim their intensity for the comfort of others. But the truth is, this depth is their spiritual wisdom, their divine gift. Jung believed that such souls were necessary for the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming one's truest self. Their path may be lonely, but it is sacred. It is through their introspection, their emotional insight, and their quiet strength that they awaken others to what truly matters. Every INFJ and INTJ carries a kind of ancient knowing, an intuitive intelligence that feels both a blessing and a burden. They read emotions like sacred texts. They sense energy shifts before words are spoken, and they often see through illusions others build their lives around. This constant awareness can feel like walking through the world without armor. And yet, within this sensitivity lies power. When they stop resisting their nature and begin to honor it, they transform their suffering into wisdom. Their empathy becomes their compass, their solitude becomes their strength, and their deep perception becomes their way of healing others. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For these intuitive souls, that means embracing their complexity instead of apologizing for it. Their inner pain is not a flaw to be fixed. It is the price of deep consciousness. And when they learn to carry it with grace, they become living proof that spiritual awakening often begins with understanding the beauty hidden inside our pain. If you've ever felt the quiet suffering of seeing too deeply and feeling too much, know that you're not alone. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's heal and grow together through this journey of spiritual wisdom. 4. Inner conflict. From a young age, INFJs and INTJs carry a quiet awareness that they are different while others chase noise and novelty. They are drawn to truth, purpose, and the invisible dimensions of life. Their minds reach beyond what is seen, searching for something that feels real in a world obsessed with appearances. This early sense of disconnection is not arrogance, but the first whisper of spiritual awakening, a sign that their consciousness is wired for depth, not distraction. Yet that same depth soon becomes a burden, for the world rarely celebrates those who think, feel, and see too much. They begin to learn that their inner world, vast, mysterious, and alive with questions, must often be hidden to survive among those who live only on the surface. As adults, they wear masks not out of deceit, but necessity, softening their truth so they can coexist in a culture that values conformity more than authenticity. They smile while their thoughts travel through invisible universes. They nod while others discuss what feels meaningless. Beneath their calm expression lies a storm of insight, intuition, and longing for real connection. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate things that seem important to you." This is the quiet ache that defines their life, being surrounded by people, yet feeling unseen, being heard, yet never understood. The more they try to express their truth, the more they're told it's too serious, too complex, or too heavy, and so they retreat into silence, convinced that their depth is a flaw. But that silence becomes sacred ground, the place where their spirituality matures. Their inner world, though unseen, becomes their temple. It's where they meet themselves and the universe in secret, learning that understanding doesn't always come from others. Sometimes It comes from solitude. Their pain is not the pain of weakness, but of awakening. To be spiritually awake in a world asleep is to carry both blessing and burden. The INFJ and INTJ learn that their suffering is not punishment. It is refinement. Like gold in the fire, their soul is being purified through misunderstanding and isolation. What they feel as rejection is often protection, a divine barrier separating them from what would dull their light. Each time they suppress their truth to fit in, they build endurance. Each time they are misunderstood, they strengthen the bond with their higher self. Their spiritual awakening deepens not through praise, but through solitude, where clarity grows stronger than comfort. They begin to realize that the purpose of their depth is not to be validated, but to transform the world quietly through presence, compassion, and insight. The world may call them distant, but in truth, they are simply tuned to a higher frequency one that resonates with meaning rather than noise. They are not lost souls, but silent architects of consciousness, bridging logic and intuition, intellect and soul. This is the hidden pain of the wise, to be seen but not known, to walk among many yet belong to few. But within that pain lies their greatest power. Because once they stop apologizing for their depth, once they honor their own rhythm instead of chasing the world's approval, they become unstoppable forces of transformation. Their calm becomes magnetic, their silence becomes eloquence, and their presence becomes light. Through this sacred inner journey, INFJs and INTJs learn that spirituality is not about escaping the world, but carrying their truth within it, and that the very pain that once isolated them was, in truth, their initiation into spiritual wisdom. If this message resonates with your inner world, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's support each other through this journey of self-understanding and healing. Together, we can turn inner conflict into spiritual growth and peace. 5. Jung's deeper meaning. Carl Jung once described INFJs and INTJs as mediators of the collective unconscious, the hidden carriers of humanity's symbols, emotions, and forgotten wisdom. Within them lies a rare gift, the ability to sense what others cannot see, to translate invisible truths into understanding, and to hold both the shadow and the light of human experience. Yet this gift is also their greatest pain. When they deny this inner calling, when they silence their intuition or conform to a world that values logic over depth, their soul begins to ache. They lose meaning, fall into melancholy, and drift through life wondering why they feel disconnected even in a crowd. Their pain is not weakness. It is a symptom of resisting their true nature, of turning away from their spiritual purpose. INFJs and INTJs experience the world through emotional resonance and intuitive perception. They sense unspoken feelings, see through pretenses, and recognize patterns others overlook. In spirituality, this sensitivity is a higher awareness, a direct link to the unseen forces shaping human behavior. But in everyday life, it often feels like a curse. The noise, chaos, and superficiality of the modern world overwhelm them. They feel too much, think too deeply, and love too purely. They often find themselves misunderstood, judged for being too distant or too intense, when in truth, they are simply exhausted from feeling everything so deeply. Their pain is the weight of carrying both their own emotions and those of others, an invisible burden that slowly teaches them the necessity of solitude and boundaries. The turning point comes when they stop resisting this inner power. Jung believed that the unconscious does not only hide darkness, it also holds divine wisdom. When INFJs and INTJs embrace their depth instead of fearing it, they discover that their pain has always been a doorway to transformation. Through spiritual growth, the shadows they once suppressed become sources of strength. Their sensitivity becomes intuition. Their isolation becomes clarity, and their suffering becomes compassion. What once felt like alienation transforms into a profound sense of purpose. The realization that their role is not to fit into the world, but to awaken it. Their inner visions, when expressed through art, writing, teaching, or leadership, become healing channels for others. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For INFJs and INTJs, that truth means accepting that their depth is sacred. They are not here to be ordinary. They are here to be spiritual mirrors, reflecting back to humanity what it refuses to see. Their journey of spiritual growth is not about escaping sensitivity, but mastering it, transforming it into wisdom, empathy, and quiet power. When they stop apologizing for their intensity and start honoring their spiritual design, they become living proof that pain can be turned into purpose and loneliness into light. Their lives remind us that the deepest souls are not those untouched by pain, but those who have learned to turn pain into healing for themselves and for the world. When you start to question deeply, you begin to see beyond appearances, just as Carl Jung taught. True wisdom comes from facing your inner truth. If you're ready to look within and find freedom through understanding, type in the comments, "I seek deeper meaning." Let this be your declaration of self-awareness and transformation. 6. The path to healing and joy. Joy is born not from escaping the world, but from embracing solitude as a sacred space where creation, reflection, and service become acts of spiritual awakening. When you sit in silence, not to hide but to listen, you begin to hear the quiet language of your own soul. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." In that stillness, you awaken not through noise or distraction, but through the gentle unfolding of inner truth. For INFJs and INTJs, solitude is not punishment. It is purification. It is the place where you transform confusion into clarity, pain into poetry, and emotion into form. Each moment spent journaling, painting, writing, or simply walking in nature is not an escape from reality, but a dialogue with the unseen world within you. Through this dialogue, you start to understand that your emotions are not burdens to be carried, but messages to be translated, symbols of the unconscious seeking expression through you. Your gift lies in your ability to build bridges between the conscious and the unconscious, between the material and the mystical. This is where true spiritual wisdom unfolds. You are not just a thinker or a dreamer. You are an alchemist, turning invisible feelings into visible creations. Through art, music, writing, mentoring, and deep conversation, you give shape to what others can only sense. You carry within you the power to heal, to guide, and to awaken, not by avoiding solitude, but by entering it with intention. When solitude is chosen with awareness, it becomes a sanctuary, a temple where you meet your own divinity. Within that sacred stillness, you discover that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but honoring what is sacred within your sensitivity. As you transform your emotions into creative expression, you fulfill your soul's highest purpose to bring light into form. Joy flows naturally when your solitude becomes purposeful, when reflection turns into revelation, and when your inner world meets the world beyond. Carl Jung believed that creativity is the bridge through which the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind. And through that bridge, you find not only healing, but wholeness. So each time you pick up your pen, play a melody, or share your truth in conversation, you are engaging in an act of spiritual alchemy, turning the lead of sorrow into the gold of wisdom. In this transformation, solitude stops feeling like isolation and begins to feel like communion. A quiet meeting between your human self and your higher self. It is there, in that sacred meeting place, that true joy emerges. You realize that your depth is not a curse, but a calling, that your quietness is not emptiness, but fertile ground for creation. And as you live with greater intention, every breath, every thought, and every act of creation becomes a bridge to something eternal, the living proof that the most profound healing comes from within. And so, the hidden pain of INFJs and INTJs is not weakness. It's the silent evidence of depth, of souls who feel too much, see too far, and care too deeply in a world that often misunderstands them. Remember, your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's your spiritual compass, guiding you toward truth, authenticity, and awakening. Never dim your inner light just because others can't handle its intensity. If this message resonates with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming explorations into the soul, the psyche, and the wisdom of Carl Jung. When the narcissist realizes the empath has learned their language. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. In today's episode on Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore one of the most powerful turning points in human relationships. The moment when the empath finally learns to speak the narcissist's unspoken language. This isn't about manipulation or revenge. It's about awakening, about seeing through illusions and reclaiming your emotional freedom. Have you ever noticed how, once you understand someone's patterns, they can no longer control you? That's the moment Jung called illumination, when awareness replaces confusion. As you listen, reflect on your own relationships and ask yourself, have I been reacting to someone else's script, or am I ready to write my own? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight may be the very key that helps another empath awaken. 1. The moment of awakening. When an empath begins to understand the narcissist's psychological language, their patterns of manipulation, emotional control, and unspoken strategies, a profound shift takes place. The balance of power begins to crumble, and the game that once kept the empath trapped starts to dissolve under the light of awareness. This is the sacred moment Carl Jung described as the meeting of the conscious and the unconscious. The instant when you finally see what has been hiding in plain sight. The empath, who once reacted with guilt, fear, or over-explaining, now pauses, observes, and responds with quiet detachment. That silence, the very silence the narcissist once used as a weapon, becomes the empath's new strength, an act of spiritual rebellion that says, I see you, but I no longer serve your illusion. This is the moment of awakening, where spirituality and psychology merge into one powerful realization. You can't heal someone who benefits from keeping you confused. The empath, once ruled by compassion without discernment, begins to embody conscious empathy, an empathy rooted in truth, not fantasy. You start to recognize that every guilt trip is a mirror reflecting your own unhealed need for approval. Every charm offensive is a test of your inner boundaries. Every silent treatment is an invitation to return to your own inner peace. The narcissist's tactics don't vanish, but they lose their potency because your energy no longer feeds the cycle. This is not revenge, it's liberation. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating your shadow, your pain, and your light into one unshakable presence. And yet, this shift is not without turbulence. When the narcissist senses that their control is slipping, they often escalate using emotional chaos as a last attempt to pull you back into the web. They may provoke, manipulate, or withdraw entirely, hoping your old fears will resurface. But something in you has changed. You no longer seek validation in the storm. You have found it in stillness. What once felt like punishment now feels like proof of your growth. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, not the absence of darkness, but the mastery of how to stand in your light without needing to extinguish anyone else's. Through this new lens, the empath begins to see energy as it truly is: vibrational, transparent, and interconnected. You realize that what you once mistook for love was often control disguised as affection, and what you once offered as healing was actually self-sacrifice born from a wound. True spirituality teaches discernment, to love without losing yourself, to forgive without re-entering harm, to hold compassion without becoming someone's emotional host. You stop chasing closure from people incapable of honesty because your inner clarity becomes the closure. You stop explaining your worth to those addicted to power because your calm presence now speaks louder than any defense. The narcissist, faced with this transformation, is left standing before a mirror they can no longer manipulate. The empath they once drained has become self-contained, radiating an energy too balanced to exploit. Their usual tactics of blame, projection, and flattery no longer land because consciousness cannot be deceived. This is not the empath's revenge, but their resurrection. The energy that once spiraled in confusion now flows upward in awareness. The empath's frequency rises, and with it, the illusion of control shatters completely. What remains is a quiet sovereignty, a peace so deep that it becomes untouchable. This is the higher truth of spirituality. When awareness expands, manipulation dissolves, and the awakened empath no longer reacts. They simply exist in truth, radiant, free, and beyond the reach of shadow. Have you ever recognized the exact moment your soul woke up, when you finally saw through manipulation and chose your peace instead? If you have, share your story in the comments below to inspire others on this path of awakening. If not, comment, "I'm ready to awaken," and let this be the moment you step into your own power. 2. Manipulation as control of inner territory. Carl Jung revealed that the narcissist's communication is never about intimacy. It's about power. Their charm, their silence, their sudden bursts of anger are not spontaneous emotions, but strategic tools designed to invade and dominate the empath's inner territory. They study your responses, mirror your emotions, and manipulate your compassion, until it becomes a leash around your soul. The empath, by nature, wants to heal and understand. But this very instinct becomes the narcissist's playground. Every gesture, every word, every silence from them is a means of control, a way to make you question your own worth, doubt your own memory, and slowly surrender your sense of reality. Yet there comes a sacred turning point in spirituality and spiritual growth the moment the empath awakens. When you finally recognize that their patterns are mechanical, not personal, you step outside the game. You begin to see their manipulation as a reflection of their own emptiness, not your inadequacy. Their charm no longer enchants, their silence no longer intimidates, and their rage no longer defines the rhythm of your heart. When you reach this level of awareness, you start to see their behavior as a system, predictable and repetitive, lacking the depth it once seemed to have. You realize that they don't want connection, they want control. Their compliments are currency, their affection is a transaction, and their pain is a weapon. But once your perception sharpens, you stop reacting. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing to prove your purity to someone who profits from your guilt. This is the first breath of freedom, the awakening of your inner authority. Jung described this as individuation, the process of becoming whole by withdrawing your energy from the illusions of others. You begin to master the art of inner neutrality, the ability to stay calm even when provoked. This calmness is not weakness, it's sovereignty. It confuses the narcissist because their entire identity relies on reaction. When you refuse to play their emotional game, their control dissolves like smoke. Now, you operate from presence, not fear. You speak less, but see more. You feel their projections, yet refuse to absorb them. You understand that every manipulation they attempt is a mirror reflecting where they are still unhealed. And through this understanding, you transmute pain into wisdom, reaction into awareness. Spiritual growth teaches you that you cannot fight darkness by entering its arena. You dissolve it by holding your light steady. The narcissist loses power not because you fought back, but because you stopped needing to prove that you were good. You stopped letting their behavior define your peace. You learned that empathy without discernment becomes self-betrayal, and compassion without boundaries becomes captivity. In this awareness, you reclaim your mind, your energy, your inner sanctuary. The narcissist may still perform their illusions, but you no longer attend the show. What once ruled you now reveals itself as empty repetition, and you, the empath, evolve beyond their reach. No longer a target, but a mirror, too clear for deception to survive. Comment below. I protect my inner peace. If you're ready to take back control of your emotional territory and no longer let manipulation define your energy. 3. Individuation and shadow literacy. Recognizing manipulation is not just an act of awareness, it is the birth of individuation, the sacred process Carl Jung described as separating your true self from the unconscious influence of others. When you begin to see through manipulation, you awaken to both the narcissist's darkness and your own hidden wounds, the craving for approval, the fear of abandonment, the confusion of chaos with love. This moment of clarity is not about judging them. It's about realizing how deeply you once allowed someone else's shadow to dance with your own. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. every time you notice manipulation and no longer react as before, you're taking back your power from fate itself. You're no longer a passive participant in someone's psychological drama. You're the witness, the observer, the one who has finally learned the language of the shadow. And this is what spiritual wisdom truly means. Not escaping darkness, but reading it fluently. When you learn the narcissist's language, you begin to understand the structure of their tactics, their guilt trips, silent treatments, and emotional traps, and something shifts inside you. You stop dancing to their rhythm. The hooks that once pulled you into endless cycles of emotional chaos now lose their grip. Their anger, their charm, their sudden affection no longer confuse you, because you can see the machinery behind it all. You've stopped reacting, and that's when they panic. They sense the energetic disconnection. They feel your peace as a threat, your clarity as rebellion. But this is not revenge. It's evolution. The moment the empath stops absorbing pain and starts reflecting truth, the dynamic collapses. The narcissist no longer sees a mirror. They see a mystery they cannot manipulate. Yet the deeper truth is that this awakening is not just about them. It's about you, meeting your own shadow with compassion. The reason you once tolerated manipulation wasn't weakness. It was unhealed love. You mistook saving others for loving yourself. You thought peace was found in keeping the harmony, even when it cost your soul. But now, you see that empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The spiritual awakening Carl Jung spoke of is not soft or sentimental. It's fierce clarity wrapped in grace. You begin to realize that you can love people and still walk away, that you can forgive them and still protect your energy. You no longer confuse understanding with tolerating, nor peace with silence. When the empath learns the narcissist's language, they no longer need to speak it. They've transcended it. Their silence becomes their message. Their boundaries become their protection, and their stillness becomes their highest vibration. You stop trying to prove your worth because you finally remember that you were never meant to beg for love that must be earned through suffering. The real battle was never against the narcissist. It was between your wounded self and your awakened self. And once the awakened one takes the lead, manipulation loses all meaning. To see through illusion is to become free from it. That is the moment when your peace is no longer a strategy, it becomes your natural state. You no longer seek validation from others, because the only approval you need is your own awareness. You are no longer defined by the shadows you've survived. You are illuminated by the light you've reclaimed. 4. The recognition crisis. When the narcissist realizes they have been decoded, their entire sense of self begins to collapse like a fragile mask exposed to truth. This is what Carl Jung referred to as the dark night of the soul, a stage of deep psychological and spiritual crisis where the false self can no longer sustain its illusions. For years, the narcissist has hidden behind manipulation, charm, and control, constructing a facade to protect themselves from their own inner void. But when that mask shatters, when their language of guilt, silence, and emotional warfare no longer controls the empath, they are forced to confront the emptiness they've spent a lifetime running from. Their entire identity, once built on power and validation, begins to dissolve. What follows is not just emotional chaos, but a spiritual reckoning, where shame and suppressed wounds rise from the depths of the unconscious, demanding to be seen. In spirituality, This collapse is not punishment. It is the beginning of awakening. The moment the soul is stripped of illusion so truth can emerge. In that moment of exposure, the narcissist feels an unbearable tension between who they pretend to be and who they truly are. The manipulative strategies that once ensured dominance, gaslighting, silent treatment, emotional triangulation, lose their potency when the empath stops reacting. The empath, through their own spiritual awakening, has learned the unspoken code of manipulation and no longer feeds the narcissist's ego with emotional energy. This shift creates what Jung might call a psychic inversion. The power dynamic flips, and the narcissist finds themselves lost in a maze of their own projections. They begin to see that the game is over, that control no longer grants them safety, and that the person who once absorbed their pain now reflects it back like a mirror. It's a terrifying revelation because it exposes the narcissist's dependence on others for identity, a truth they can neither accept nor escape. Some respond with rage, others with denial, and a few disguise their collapse behind spiritual language, claiming to be enlightened while still avoiding the inner work that true transformation requires. Jung warned about this illusion, calling it spiritual inflation, when the ego uses the language of spirituality to maintain its superiority rather than surrender to humility. The narcissist may begin quoting wisdom or adopting spiritual postures, but their energy reveals the truth. Beneath the surface lies unhealed shame, masquerading as enlightenment. Yet even this false awakening serves a purpose. Every facade that fails brings them closer to the moment of surrender, when they must finally confront the darkness within. True spirituality, after all, does not bypass pain, it transforms it. Meanwhile, the empath stands as both witness and survivor of this unraveling. Their own journey is one of emotional liberation and evolution from codependency to consciousness. They realize that peace does not come from fixing the narcissist, but from reclaiming their power and refusing to participate in energetic manipulation. Their compassion becomes mature, guided by discernment rather than guilt. They understand now that real love cannot exist without boundaries, and that spirituality is not about saving others, but preserving the sacred connection to their own soul. As Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The empath has made the unconscious conscious. They no longer dance to the narcissist's tune because they have remembered their own rhythm, the rhythm of truth, awareness, and self-respect. In this recognition crisis, both souls stand at a crossroads of transformation. The narcissist, stripped of illusion, faces the abyss of self-knowledge that could either destroy them or set them free. The empath, having transcended the cycle of control, enters a higher state of spiritual awakening, where awareness replaces reaction and peace replaces chaos. This confrontation between shadow and light, ego and soul, is not the end, but the sacred beginning of authenticity, where manipulation dissolves and consciousness becomes the only language left to speak. Don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights on mastering emotional awareness and understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior. 5. The dark mirror temptation. As the empath begins to awaken, there comes a powerful temptation hidden within the shadows. The urge to use the narcissist's own tactics against them, to return the silent treatments, the guilt trips, and the emotional manipulation that once caused so much pain. It feels almost justified, as if turning their own darkness back upon them could restore balance. But Carl Jung warned of this dangerous illusion. He called it shadow possession, the moment when the soul, in trying to defend itself, becomes entangled in the very darkness it sought to overcome. The empath may believe they are reclaiming their power, but what truly happens is that they begin to mirror the very energy that once enslaved them. It is not liberation, but imitation disguised as control. And this is where the real spiritual test begins. The path of spiritual growth demands awareness without imitation, strength without cruelty, power without domination. It's easy to think that awakening gives you permission to fight fire with fire, but true mastery means refusing to become what wounded you. When the empath evolves, they realize that their gift is not in manipulation, but in perception, the ability to see through illusion without losing compassion. The moment you start to control or punish as they did, your light dims, your energy becomes reactive, and you unknowingly feed the very system of control you once escaped. Jung's wisdom reminds us that what you resist persists, and when you resist the narcissist by playing their game, you remain bound to them energetically. Real power is silent, not because it fears confrontation, but because it no longer seeks validation from the same darkness it has already transcended. To be awake is to observe their behavior without absorbing it, to respond with calm awareness instead of emotional retaliation. This is where spirituality transforms into strength, when your energy no longer bends to their chaos. You stop reacting, and in that stillness, something miraculous happens. Their control evaporates. You become untouchable because your peace can no longer be manipulated. That is the true language of the awakened empath, not words of revenge, but the vibration of inner equilibrium. You learn to see through their patterns, to recognize their pain without inheriting it, to set boundaries not from anger, but from sacred self-respect. Yet the shadow still whispers. It tempts you with the satisfaction of making them feel what you once felt. It tells you that justice is mimicry, but imitation is spiritual decay. It's the soul forgetting its own light. Jung understood that the greatest danger is not the existence of the shadow, but identification with it. When you identify with the shadow, you lose your authenticity, your softness, your essence. But when you acknowledge it consciously, when you can say, "I see this darkness in me, and I choose differently," you transform it. You turn poison into wisdom, wounds into insight, pain into power. That is the true alchemy of the empath's journey. So the lesson is clear. Awakening is not about revenge. It's about transcendence. You don't win by outplaying the narcissist. You win by outgrowing the game. The empath's highest power lies not in manipulation, but in mastery, not in controlling others, but in governing one's own inner world. That is the essence of spirituality, to stand in awareness so complete that nothing external can shake your peace. When you understand this, you no longer wish to make them suffer. You simply rise beyond their reach, grounded in truth, glowing in quiet strength, free at last from the need to mirror their darkness. 6. Conscious detachment and intuitive immunity. Healing truly begins when you learn the art of conscious detachment, the ability to see manipulation without letting it penetrate your soul. You no longer drown in other people's chaos, nor do you take responsibility for emotions that aren't yours. Instead, you become the observer, calm and aware, able to read the language of control without reacting to it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Through spiritual wisdom, you start recognizing how much of your pain was simply unawareness, mistaking empathy for duty, compassion for submission, and love for endurance. But as your awareness expands, you begin to see clearly that healing is not about proving your goodness. It's about reclaiming your peace. This clarity gives birth to something deeper than intuitive immunity. It's an invisible shield formed not by resistance, but by deep understanding. You start sensing toxic energy before it enters your emotional space. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, nor chase validation from those who thrive on your confusion. You stop reacting, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the game. Jung believed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that truth becomes your quiet weapon. Each manipulation attempt becomes an opportunity to strengthen your emotional mastery. You realize that your calm unnerves those who once thrived on your chaos, and your silence speaks louder than any defense you could ever give. As this inner transformation unfolds, emotional sovereignty becomes your natural state. You stop needing to fix, to please, to rescue. You begin to honor your own rhythm, guided not by guilt, but by intuition. Spiritual wisdom reminds you that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction disguised as kindness. So you start loving differently, not less, but wiser. You can hold compassion and still walk away. You can understand someone's pain and still protect your energy. You no longer confuse endurance with loyalty. You have learned that peace is not avoidance. It is presence without attachment. And when a narcissist realizes you've learned their language, something profound happens. Their tactics lose power because your consciousness no longer feeds their illusion. You see through their charm, their guilt trips, their emotional bait, and instead of reacting, you simply detach with grace. They speak in manipulation. You respond with silence. They seek drama. You offer stillness. Jung called this the process of individuation, the moment when you integrate shadow and light, no longer defined by projection or fear. You become your own source of validation, no longer swayed by emotional storms around you. This is the sacred turning point where an empath becomes untouchable, not through coldness, but through clarity. Conscious detachment allows you to love without losing yourself, to care without carrying what's not yours. Intuitive immunity becomes your spiritual armor, forged through experience, compassion, and truth. You have stopped being reactive and started being responsive, moving from emotional chaos to divine composure. That is the silent revolution of awakening when peace becomes your language and presence becomes your power. If you've reached this point, it means you're learning the power of conscious detachment. Comment below, "I'm centered," to affirm your emotional freedom, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Carl Jung inspired spiritual wisdom to strengthen your intuitive immunity. 7. Healing and relearning authentic connection. The empath's true healing begins when he starts to unlearn the very strategies that once kept him alive. The constant hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the quiet anticipation of someone else's moods. These patterns were armor once, but now they are chains. And in the journey of spirituality and spiritual awakening, freedom begins when you no longer confuse survival with love. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth echoes deeply for the empath, who has spent a lifetime navigating chaos as if it were normal. When you stop trying to manage everyone's emotions and finally face your own, you begin to speak a new emotional language, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. It feels strange at first because peace feels unnatural after so many years of internal storms. Yet it is in this strangeness that transformation takes root. As you begin to heal, something inside you resists. The silence feels heavy. The calm feels suspicious, and your nervous system searches for the familiar turbulence it once called home. You may even crave conflict because peace feels too still. But this discomfort is sacred. It is the body learning that safety does not mean danger is coming, and that love does not have to hurt. In this space, your spirit begins to remember its natural rhythm. Slow, grounded, steady. The constant scanning for danger fades, and instead of reading others to survive, you start listening to yourself to live. That is the beginning of authentic connection, not built on fear, but on presence. In this stage, spirituality stops being an idea and becomes an experience. You start to notice that true love requires no performance, no rescuing, no sacrifice of self. The empath who once carried the world on his shoulders learns that peace is not emptiness. It is power. The more you honor your truth, the more your relationships change. Some people fall away from those who needed your chaos to feel significant, but in their place come connections rooted in equality and respect. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of shadow and light, the moment when you stop chasing validation and begin living from your own center. This relearning is not gentle. It will test your patience as you rebuild your sense of self without guilt. You will notice how your body relaxes when you are no longer pretending, how your mind clears when you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Slowly, the urge to fix others dissolves, replaced by the desire to simply be whole. This is how the empath reclaims his energy, not by closing his heart, but by keeping it open only to what is true. And in that quiet, something profound happens. You feel peace, not as a temporary relief, but as a state of being. The empath, who once lived in reaction, now lives in alignment. The chaos that once defined you no longer has power because you have learned to understand its language and no longer respond to its tone. This is spiritual wisdom in motion, the realization that healing is not becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before the world taught you to shrink. It is a homecoming to yourself, a return to authenticity where connection flows naturally, without fear, without control, without masks. And though it feels unfamiliar, it is the truest form of peace your soul has ever known. 8. Individuation and collective healing. When the empath reaches the point of individuation, something profound happens, and your compassion becomes conscious. You no longer absorb everyone's emotions as your own. You begin to understand that love without limits is not love, it's self-erasure. This new awareness transforms your energy. Instead of reacting to pain, you respond with clarity. Instead of trying to fix what's broken in others, you hold space for them to choose healing. Carl Jung called this the essence of human evolution, becoming a whole individual capable of loving without losing the self. In this sacred maturity, empathy no longer drains you, it grounds you. Your presence no longer feeds manipulation, it reveals it. You start attracting people who respect your energy, who meet you where you stand, not those who feed off your light. This is spirituality in action, learning that compassion is not about suffering with others, but shining in front of them so they can find their way. As you embody conscious empathy, your nervous system softens, your inner world steadies, and your voice returns. The anxious need to explain, to fix, to be understood begins to fade. You start hearing your authentic voice again, the one that was buried under guilt, noise, and people-pleasing. The old hooks that used to pull you into others' chaos lose their power. You are no longer reactive. You are rooted. This is the subtle but powerful shift from survival to sovereignty, from confusion to conscious choice. Jung saw this as a turning point in the collective psyche, where humanity evolves not by dominance, but by awareness, not by manipulation, but by authenticity. You realize that freedom isn't found in controlling others. It's found in outgrowing the need to. And as your inner world transforms, the outer world responds. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your silence becomes your statement. And your energy begins to filter who can truly walk beside you. Those who cannot match your frequency fall away, not because of rejection, but because resonance no longer allows distortion to stay. Every boundary you hold is a declaration of self-respect, and every act of self-respect ripples outward, teaching others how to love without control. This is how individual healing becomes collective healing. Your example shows that it's possible to be soft yet strong, kind yet firm, spiritual yet discerning. True spirituality is not escape, it is embodiment. It is the art of returning to yourself so deeply that your very presence becomes medicine for the world. In this awareness, manipulation no longer tempts you, validation no longer defines you, and chaos no longer fascinates you. You are free, not because you've mastered the game, but because you've stepped outside of it. You've remembered your authentic rhythm. You live not to please, but to align. You love not to earn, but to express. That is the real victory. The moment when empathy matures into wisdom, when compassion gains backbone, and when the soul finally remembers its own sacred language. That is spiritual growth in its truest form, the awakening that teaches you that the most powerful healing begins when you stop trying to save others and start embodying the wholeness that saves the world through you. When an empath learns to see through manipulation, something profound happens. Peace replaces reaction. Awareness replaces confusion. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The moment you recognize the patterns, you reclaim your power. Let this be your reminder that healing doesn't mean hardening. It means learning the language of truth. So, in your daily life, notice what energy you respond to and choose presence over reaction. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone's control no longer works on you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might awaken someone else's light. And if this message from spiritual wisdom spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep walking your path of awareness and inner strength.